In this video, I'm going to show you how to get PSP Emulation set up on the PC version of Retroarch. The PSP, Sony's first handheld, and the one that got me really deep into the homebrew community. I absolutely loved the homebrew scene on PSP, and it continues strong to this day. But outside of homebrew, the PSP had a very strong library of games, and its emulation is really, really great. So you can play almost all of those games on PSP Emulation, and today I'm going to show you how to get that set up on the PC version of Retroarch. So let's dive in. So to get started with PSP emulation on the PC version of Retroarch, you need to install the PC version of Retroarch. So I have two guides on how to do it, one for standalone, one for Steam. The Steam version is basically replacing the Steam version with the standalone version, so it's essentially the same guide. So if you don't have Retroarch installed, link to this will be in the description below. It goes over how to get it installed, as well as a number of optional settings that you might be interested in. Next, you are going to need to source some PSP games. So if you own a physical collection of PSP games as well as a modded PSP, it is really simple to dump the ISO files using your own disks. Or as always, you can resort to Google and do things that way. I really don't care how you do it, just don't ask me for illegal download links because I'm not going to provide them. But PSP games should be in ISO format, and if you want to save some space, you can convert these into CSOs or compressed ISO files. So if that is a process that you're interested in doing, you can head over to my description, find the link for Max CSO here, put the exe in your PSP game directory, launch it, and it will compress those games down for you. But once you have your PSP games sourced and converted to CSO if you choose, just put them anywhere on your hard drive. It doesn't matter where they go. So for my demonstration purposes, I'm just going to put them in the Retroarch folder, Games folder, PSP Games, there we go. Good to go. And now we just need to download the PPSSPP core within Retroarch. So go ahead and load up into Retroarch. And if you have any controllers that you wish to use, you can attach them now or use the keyboard to do navigation. But from the main menu here, we are going to go into the online updater, core downloader, press right or up on your keyboard or controller to get to the Sony section, and look for PlayStation Portable PPSSPP, and then press enter to get it downloaded. And with that downloaded, just back out of this menu, and head down to the core system files downloader. And then from here, download the PPSSPP zip folder, and this is your PSP system folder basically. You used to have to manually download this and add it yourself, but now it is all built into Retroarch as of a few versions back. And once you have the core and the system file downloaded, you can just back out to the main menu, and you are now ready to begin loading up PSP content. So one method of doing so is to go to Load Content, navigate to the directory where your games are stored. So for me on the desktop, it would be right here. My Retroarch folder, my Games folder, my PSP Games folder. And then you can choose a game, select your core, and it should automatically run. And if you see text and everything showing up properly, you know you've done it correctly. But I'm not really a big fan of that method of loading up games, so what I like to do instead is use the Retroarch desktop menu to create a games playlist. So the easiest way to do this, just press F5 on your keyboard or go to the show desktop menu here on the main menu, and that will boot you into the Retroarch desktop menu. So over on the left here, you'll see the content browser. So just right click anywhere in this white space, new playlist, and type in Sony space PlayStation Portable, and then press enter. And you'll get a nice playlist entry here on the left with a PSP icon ready to go, so just select that. And now in the main white area here, just right click, add folder, navigate to the directory where your games are stored, select the folder. Now for the core, select PPSSPP and database, Sony PlayStation Portable, and then press OK, and all of your games should now populate the menu. Now from here, if you want to make the playlist look a little bit prettier, you can begin downloading cover art. So you could try downloading it just by selecting it, right click, download thumbnail, but chances are it won't find anything. Games need to be named in a specific way for the built-in downloader to find them. So for example, it's usually looking for the game name, followed by a region code, but I don't think I have Crisis coordinated correctly as well, so we'll see right here. Nope, no good. Alright, let's try Peace Walker then. Nope, no good on that one either. Alright, Soul Calibur. One of these ought to work. Or not. Alright, that's fine. So what I like to do in cases like this where it can't quite find the cover art, I just head to GameFAQs, go to the game in question, media section, boxes, and then there's box arts for all the versions of the game, and it's really nice and easy. Just click on it, right click, save the image. I'm going to put that on my desktop, there we go. So now on my desktop I have the image right here. It's in JPEG format, and unfortunately that doesn't work directly with the desktop menu of Retroarch, but that's fine. All we need to do is open up Paint in Windows, drag the cover art file in, and then just save it as a PNG picture. And then you don't even need to change the name, just leave it how it is. So now I'm going to make sure that I have the game in question that I'm looking to add cover art to. So my example, Soul Calibur. Got that selected. Going to drag the PNG formatted picture right into the box art section here, and now it has a nice new box art. And you can continue doing this for every game as you see fit. So for my example today, I'm just going to leave it with Soul Calibur. But once you have your playlist made and box arts populated as you want, you can just close out of the desktop menu. Then back over on the Retroarch menu, press F on your keyboard to make it full screen. And to get our new playlist to show up within the main menu here, just go down to Restart Retroarch and press Enter. Now over on the left, we have a new PlayStation Portable playlist here with all of our games listed. And again, if you put cover art on them, that'll show up over on the right side of the screen, and it looks pretty great. And then to play a game, all you need to do is select it, and then press Run. And there you have it, PSP Emulation up and running on your PC version of Retroarch. But this being emulation means that there is just so much more we can do here. So, from this point in the video on, we're going to be covering advanced settings available to us within the PPSSPP core in Retroarch. So, to access your core options, press F1 on your keyboard or the guide button on a controller to access the quick menu. And then from here, scroll down to Core Options. So our first set of options are in the System tab here. So first up, Language. So Automatic should work for most people by default, but if it doesn't, you can change your PSP's emulated language right here. Next, we're going to skip a few options because we're just going to leave them as they are. So CPU core, fast memory, ignore bad memory access, and I/O timing, we're going to leave those as is. Next up, Force Real Clock Sync. This is a more accurate option, so you can enable it if you have a fast CPU, but if it causes you issues, turn it back off. Next up, Locked CPU Speed. So the PSP had a number of different CPU frequencies it could run games at. So by default, games will choose the ones that they need, but if you want to force a lower or higher speed in different games, you could do so here. Might boost performance by a couple frames in some games, others it might not have any noticeable effect. Next, cache full ISO in RAM. So this will cache the entire PSP game image into your system's RAM as it launches to help with loading times and loading performance. The trade-off to this is that it will take a few more seconds for your games to load. But if you're using a slower hard drive or something that is causing loading issues, this is a good option to turn on. Next, we have internal cheat support. So if you want to use cheat codes with your PSP games like 60 FPS patches, the first thing you're going to do is turn this option on. And then from here, you're just going to close out of your PSP content. So close content, there we go. And then you can either close out of Retroarch entirely or just minimize it, doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to quit out of Retroarch. Now, to get cheats to work within your PPSSP core, you need to go into your save folder, find your PSP folder, and if a cheat folder isn't already here, you will need to create one. So just new folder and name it cheats. And now within this folder is where you're going to place your PSP cheat files. So I have a PSP cheat file here for Ace Combat X. So it needs to be named after the region code of the game in question and saved as an INI file. Now within these files, there will be a number of cheat codes. So, for example, here is a 60 FPS patch for Ace Combat X. So, to enable this patch, I just need to make sure that instead of it saying C0 here, it says C1. And then I also enabled the Force FPS to run at 60 FPS right here as well. And then, just for testing's sake, I enabled another cheat down here to unlock the F22 Raptor. So, again, if it says 0, that means it is deactivated. So to activate it, all you do is replace a 0 with a 1. But again, to use these cheats, just place them in your Retroarch folder, saves folder, PSP folder, cheats folder. And if you need any help finding cheat codes, the PPSSPP forums is a great place to start. That's where I got this Ace Combat cheat code file here. But they'll have a number of listings, you can search the threads, just tons of cheats to be found here. So link to this will be in the description below. But loading back up into RetroArch, I could test my new cheat file by going back into Ace Combat, so I'm just going to load it back up here. And right from the first briefing screen, I could tell that the 60 FPS patch has applied. This is a lot smoother than it ever has been before. So I'm going to go to mission start here. And there we go. There is my F22 unlocked using that cheat code. That's awesome. And then just in gameplay, you could tell just how much smoother everything is just by looking at the terrain underneath you and just how smoothly everything turns. Like, this is running amazingly. So again, to use cheats, make sure you have the internal cheat support option turned on. And then within your RetroArch folder, go to your save folder, PSP folder, create a cheats folder, and place your region code named file with the INI extension into the cheats folder, and you can edit the cheats within that file. But moving on, PSP model, this is set to PSP 2000, 3000 by default, and that's the better option. PSP 2000 and 3000 line had an additional 32 megabytes of RAM that the original 1000 did not. So if you're going to be doing emulated homebrew, definitely stick with the 2000 and 3000 model. And our last option within the system tab here is confirmation button. This is set to cross by default, but if you want to have a classic PlayStation experience or a Japanese PlayStation experience, you can change it over to circle. Alright, moving on. Next up, video tab. So our first option here is to change the internal resolution that our PSP games run in. So there's a number of different options available, so let's just kick this up to a full 4K, why don't we? Now, when you set an internal resolution, it does require a content restart to activate, so you can just back out of your quick menu here, core options rather, and go up to close content. And then you could just reload into it. And then upon reloading, your new resolution will take effect. So as you can see here in Ace Combat X, the ground textures and the ground models themselves are a lot more detailed, less blurry rather. But going back into our options here, the next one is to skip buffer effects. So leave this one off, otherwise you will see broken rendering effects and things like that. But if you're on a slower machine, you might want to turn it on and just have to live with the setbacks that it causes. But if you're on a decent PC, you shouldn't need this. Next up, skip GPU readbacks. Leave this one turned off. Next, frame skip. We're gonna skip over that because... And next, duplicate frames in 30 Hz games. So if you aren't planning on using 60 FPS patches on your games, I do recommend turning this one on. It can make things feel a little bit smoother. Next, buffered frames. So this is for the OpenGL and Vulkan backends only. From my understanding, this is basically a type of run ahead, so that way you get less input latency. It can be slower on weaker machines, but by default it is already set to 2 frames. So you can lower this if you have performance issues, or you could turn it off entirely. But if you're on a good PC, just leave it on 2. Next, hardware transform, leave that one on, and software scaling, leave that one on. Now our next couple of options are for lower end computers. There's the Vertex cache, so you can enable this to get a bit of a speed up, but it might cause some negative results. And then lazy texture caching. This is another one that'll result in some speed ups, but comes with some negative impacts. Again, if you are on a relatively decent PC, you shouldn't need either one of these. Next up, spline/Bezier curves quality. It's set to high by default, but again, if you're on a lower end system, you can lower the quality here to hopefully improve some performance. Not needed in all games, so it won't affect all games. Next up, hardware tessellation. If you have a decent graphics card, you can use your graphics card to do the curves. Next, lower resolution for effects, so this will keep special effects at native resolution, I believe. So if you're using upscaling, you can leave this one off, but if you have, say, a broken explosion effect at higher resolution, you can turn it on to kind of mitigate that effect. So there's 3 options, safe, balanced, and aggressive. Safe and balanced would be my recommendations. Next, texture scaling types. So for your 2D textures, this is what will be scaling them and what format it'll be scaled with. So XBRZ is the selected default, but you have hybrid bicubic and hybrid bicubic options. So you can go through these, see which one you prefer. And then you could change the texture scaling level. So the higher you scale things, the more demanding on your CPU it will be. So this is what standard XBRZ at 5x looks like. Hybrid. Bicubic, this one's more of a blurred effect. And then hybrid plus bicubic. There we go. I was really hoping I'd get to demonstrate those for you. So, there we go. So the effect of it will change depending on the game for sure, but definitely personal preference on how you like it to look. Next up, texture deposterize. If you're upscaling, I recommend turning this one on. It can fix some black lines in certain games and other visual banding effects. Next up, texture shaders. So this is a Vulkan only option and it will override the texture scaling type. It's just another texture upscaling method. But we get 2 times BRZ, 4 times BRZ, or MMPX. So if you're using the Vulkan backend and would rather use one of these options, they are available to you. So 2 times, 4 times, and then MMPX. So I think this is the one that I probably prefer personally. It keeps things looking a little bit sharper, a little less blurred, or rounded, I should say. So a little more authentic to the actual texture. At least for Ace Combat. Again, you can set all this stuff on a game-by-game basis as needed. Next up, anisotropic filtering. This is set to 16x by default, but you can lower it if desired. Now, texture filtering. So this is set to auto by default, and that should work for most cases. But there is a nearest linear and auto max quality setting. Auto should work for most cases. And our last option is for texture replacement. So this is HD texture packs. So if you're interested in using an HD texture pack, load up any PSP content, turn the option on. And then from here, you can just back out, close the content, and close out of Retroarch to get things set up. So to find HD texture packs, you can head over to the PPSSPP forums and then just look for a game that you're curious about trying out. So for my example today, we're still sticking with Ace Combat X here because there is a nice Ace Combat X HD texture pack here from Super Ostrich. So I go into here, I go to Super Ostrich's site, and then I could download the Ace Combat X HD texture pack. Now, how HD texture packs are set up are going to change based on who created them, but for our case and purposes here, we're going to have to do a manual install into the PSP saves folder. We're going to make a new folder named textures, and then we need to create a folder for the region, with the ID code of the game in question. So for me, that's Ace Combat, so we're going to copy that. Other texture packs might already come with their game code folder, so you don't need to worry about doing this extra stuff. Just read the documentation that comes with your pack. So, to install HD texture packs, go to your saves folder. Open up your PSP folder. Make a new folder and name it Textures. Now, I need to make a new folder in here after the Ace Combat game code, so I copied that in, so there we go. And now I have the HD texture pack downloaded here, so I'm just going to get that extracted. And the instructions said to drop all of these files into this game folder here, so there we go. And with that, this texture pack should now be good to go, so now I can just close out of all this. And load back up into Retroarch. And now I'm going to load up Ace Combat X and see if the texture pack is taking effect. And sure enough, that is a nice crisp Bandai Namco logo. That is a nice crisp logo. That is really crisp. That is awesome. And by default, this texture pack replaces button prompts with Xbox buttons, so that's great for using an Xbox controller with. So there we go. Combining an HD texture pack with 60 FPS patches makes this an entirely new way to experience this game. This is really cool. This is one of the great joys of emulation. So just to repeat the process, in Core Options video, make sure texture replacement is turned on. And then you'll search out an HD texture pack. And then from there, you'll go to your RetroArch saves folder, PSP folder, create a new folder named Textures, and place your HD texture pack within it with the game's code. And with that, we're done in the video tab. And last up is the network tab. So if you plan on doing some online multiplayer through private servers and stuff, this is the options that are probably going to interest you a lot here. But you can enable, disable it here, change your PSP's MAC address, change your channel, enable the built-in Pro ad hoc server. You could choose the server IP address that you're hoping to connect to. So, different options available here depending on which games you're trying to play. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to cover this in most depth. I haven't had time to really experiment with it yet. But with this option, you should be able to use Retroarch PSP with real PSPs as well as other emulated instances of PPSSPP, as well as playing online. Again, I'm not the most familiar with these options at this time. I'm hoping to maybe do a more in-depth video on these in the future. But with that, we have covered all of the core options available to us within PPSSPP. So as always, if there are options you want to have set for some games but not others, you can go up to Manage Core Options and save them as a game options file. So that way every time you load up that game, you will be greeted by those specific options and they won't apply to other games. Now, one last thing I want to cover here real quick before we call this video is shaders. So if you head down to the shaders tab, you can enable video shaders by turning the option on. And as always, make sure you have downloaded them from the online updater. But from here, you can go into load, shader slang, and load up any various shader options that are available to you. As always, shaders are a personal preference type of a deal, so there is no one-size-fit-all option. But when it comes to handheld emulation, I love to use console borders. So if I head down to the handheld folder here, console borders, there are PSP console borders built into RetroArch. So down here at the bottom, PPSSPP. So there's a number of different scaling options available. I'm going to try the 5x version here. So unfortunately, it's not applying the border correctly. Alright, but there we go. So there is a PSP handheld border in effect. Unfortunately, it doesn't look as good as it normally does when the scaling options work, so hopefully that's just an issue with my shaders and I just need to re-download them. But it gives you a nice, authentic feeling PSP experience. You get the grid lines, the LCD filter, and it just makes it look a lot more authentic. And it's kind of cool to see the PSP border on the screen as well. Unfortunately, it's a lot smaller than I'd hope it'd be right now. But again, that's the great thing about shaders. They are personal preference, so there are a number of different options you can use. So if you don't want that handheld border per se, but you still want to have, say, the PSP colors, like you could just enable that shader. And that way you have a PSP color filter applied to your games. Or you could go for an actual PSP grid lines with the color settings, just like this, but minus the console borders. So for example, here we have the PSP grid lines and color correction with our HD upscaled with our HD texture packs and upscaled to 4K. So this is just kind of a fun little experiment. Like, you could do so much with the shader effects and everything that you can do in RetroArch. Like, it's fantastic. But again, it's all personal preference, so do whichever one you think looks best for you and just run with it. But once you find a shader option that you like, you can head back into the shader tab, click on the save button here, and then save them as a core preset, so that way every time you load up PPSSPP, that is the shader that will greet you. But that's going to do it for PSP emulation within RetroArch. The PPSSPP core will allow you to experience an overwhelming majority of your PSP content, and you can experience fun little extras like cheats, HD texture packs, and online play. Again, I didn't really cover that last one a whole lot. I'm hoping to do so in a more in-depth video down the road. But as always, thank you so much for watching today's tutorial. I hope it helps you get your PSP emulation projects up and running to your liking. But here at the end, I do have a couple of huge favors to ask. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit that like or dislike button, depending on how much you like today's video, as well as that sub button and notification bell so you can see when new videos go live on the channel. I have loads of content coming your way, and I'd love to have each and every one of you along for the ride. For anyone interested in further helping the channel, you can check out that join button here on YouTube or the Patreon link in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. A little goes a long way in helping us keep this place going and bringing this content to all of you. Big shout out to all of our current backers. Thank you so much for believing in what we do here and helping us keep it going. You are the true champs, and we are so grateful to each and every one of you. But until next time, my wonderful internet peeps, you all stay awesome, keep on gaming, and we'll see you back next video.